I think for me in particular was to be a bit more open to different types of content. I mean, because I have my own personal preferences in terms of what kind of films I enjoy, and likewise for my team too. But I think we also need to be mindful that we are catering to a wider audience and having to balance commercial viability with our own personal preferences. So it's also about trying to find that balance and being open to different kinds of content in order for us to survive both as an institution in this industry. So in 2014, a friend of ours, Randy, who runs an architecture studio at Golden Mile Tower, came across these abandoned halls that were from a 1970s theater called Golden Theater. So this was built in 1970, and then as one large theater of 1,500 seater, and along the way, it got divided into smaller halls. And then was left abandoned. So he was the one who discovered it, and then he spoke to the founders, Karen and Blaze, who ran a company called Pocket Projects, which basically looked at existing buildings and repurposed them. So it's called adaptive reuse of existing buildings rather than the culture of demolishing and building new malls and all that. So he approached them, and then they actually found that there was a need for or space for something like this, and they galvanized the community through a Indiegogo and Kickstarter project to try and contribute some money. So it was privately funded through the funders, but we also mobilized the community to adopt seeds, to buy tote bags and such. And yeah, I mean, that's how it came about. And in December 2014 it launched, and it's been 6 years since. I wasn't part of the team, but I was one of the contributors. So I was then running another cafe called Artistry, which was kind of in the same space as an independent arts venue. So I was aware about this initiative and was really quite excited about it. And so I was one of the contributors who adopted a seat. I think it was about $420 or something. Yeah, so that's how I got started. And then, every Sunday after I closed Artistry in the evening, I would go walk over to a projector to watch a movie. Yeah, and so that was always the way I ended the week. And yeah, and then 2 years later, started running the bar at the Projector, intermission bar. And last year, we merged into a single entity. And so where intermission became part of Projector. And yeah, now I manage the space. It's probably hard to pinpoint one memorable experience, but I guess the most vivid one would be, I guess, the day we were forced to close. It's the most recent kind of memory where, because of COVID, and it was a very unexpected space where we were at, and we had just received news that we were to close on the 28th of March, and for us, it was almost indefinite. We didn't know how long this was going to last, what with the support that we were going to get. So it was a very, nerve-wracking kind of day. But I mean, what was great was that, the team came together. We immediately were like, okay, let's do this. Like, let's, figure out a merchandising kind of initiative to keep us going while we were not sure when cinemas would reopen. And it was great to actually see the community coming together, like all our audiences and all that, who posted like a lot of supportive messages to us to say, they would even buy vouchers not knowing when we were going to reopen. So that really was, to me, a very heartwarming experience in terms of creating because for us we had always been quite clear in our vision of creating a space which was quite inclusive and diverse, and then to see all these different people then coming back to support us was really heartwarming. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a very huge impact for us. So, for us, we were quite fixated on the idea of people coming together to watch and experience a film communally. And then COVID was the whole total reverse. So the idea that we all had to be at home and sometimes watch content from the small screen. So it required a rethink of our whole like paradigm. I mean, at the start, we wouldn't have imagined running a virtual platform, a streaming platform. We are a bunch of creative people who had got comfortable running a cinema in a sense, and here we are then trying to grapple with what streaming technology was. It was great that people came in from other organizations to try and support us in this journey. But yeah, I mean, we spent 4 months trying to learn about streaming technology, trying to appoint a new vendor, and also visualize what Projector in a virtual space would be like in its spirit, and and what community would mean in that sense, because we had always been so precious about bringing people together to share that experience. Yeah, but I mean, so in the 4 months, we managed to actually launch the Projector Plus, which is our streaming platform, which we intend to continue to grow, because it actually has brought us a new audience, and an audience who may have not been able to travel to go to mall for various different reasons, whether it's time commitments or just physical capabilities. So in a sense that it also improved our accessibility in a way that we had never thought about. So we are quite excited with the prospect of the Projector Plus, which has been a silver lining of this whole COVID experience, if we can put it that way. Yeah, and also because we're still facing challenges in the physical cinema with capacity limitations and such, and these are going to continue for a while. So for us, we are committed to running both a physical space and a virtual cinema at the same time. It's actually great. I mean, for me, it's always been an exciting space and often underrated. I think the wider audience is a bit more familiar with more mainstream movies, slapstick comedies, and such. But actually, there has been a lot of content that's been coming through. And directors like Raja Gopal, Anthony Chen, Jun Feng, and all this. They've done, and they've also succeeded on an international stage. I mean, the frustrating thing always has been like, oh, it needs to succeed on an international stage before it gets a local audience attention. But we've been trying to, push content and also keep it in the big screens for much longer. Like Wet Season actually has been running on our cinema for more than a year, since its opening at SGIFF last year. And likewise, hopefully, next year when we have some conversation, Tiong Bahru Social Club will still be running at our cinemas, because a lot of these films deserve to be seen on the big screen, and for our audience who may not have it as a priority, but we would like to keep it available and accessible. Yeah, so I mean, for us, actually, in terms of film, there's really a lot of content, both in documentary and in feature films, and we're quite happy with what's coming. And we've recently screened some film called Repossession by Ming Siu, which is a horror film, which is not a usual genre that we get. But yeah, I mean, it sold out both its screenings, and we're looking to add more screenings. So I think the audience is growing for it too, beyond the friends and family kind of scope. I think that the most important thing is to be shameless in marketing yourself. Whatever content. I think in our experience, particularly with a lot of student works or first pictures, we find them very shy in trying to promote and push their films. But ultimately, I mean, it's a very crowded space because you're fighting with a lot of international films that get much more marketing content, marketing time. So I think for us, it's really like, just go all out, make sure your friends do it, and just keep doing the hustle in order to make sure that your content gets seen by as many people as possible. Because I think a lot of people also forget that it's not just about making the film, but it's about creating awareness and not to forget about that whole marketing and distribution aspect of it. Making the film is really half the battle won, but that's really this whole. Otherwise, you're not going to get enough eyeballs, and it just disappears very quickly. So it's about keeping that marketing engine going, or getting the right support to do it. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a lot about finding knowing that these are like student works and also a bit more younger filmmakers. I was looking out for things that were a bit more genuine and that, think like that they were operating in their own comfortable space rather than trying too much to or trying too hard in a way that the voice is not so authentic anymore. So I was really looking for stuff where people were familiar about the topics that were talking about and how that translated into the feature other short films. I think yeah. I mean this year itself has probably touched on all those points in terms of how we envision spaces to be both public and private, and just changing the way we perceive how we relate to these spaces. Like I mean, a lot of things that we have taken for granted in terms of how we interact with people, the spaces that we relate to. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's actually quite a relevant topic, and it's definitely thrown a lot of perspectives that I've had and held on to quite closely, but then I have to let go of this and broaden that a bit in how I define what community is, and not being so confined by physical boundaries and physical interactions, and actually broadening that into like a virtual space. That's been my biggest take for this year, actually. I had not been a very digital person prior to this, but yeah, it's thrown me into a whole new domain. I'm not sure I do have a straight answer to this, because I do think that there's I mean, a lot of content that's coming out, and different filmmakers do it for different reasons. And to me, it's really about just keeping it real in a way, and not trying to recreate films that have a certain commercial formula that may speak to an audience. But I think I quite like that a lot of filmmakers in Singapore are actually just doing what they want in terms of the feature films and everything, and then trying to find an audience for it, rather than the reverse, where you try and recreate films. Because there is that, where there is the commercial kind of films where you follow a certain formula and you get box office success. But to me, I think probably I just look forward to very authentic voices, and it doesn't need to always represent like the underbellies of society and that kind of thing. But it's really, I mean, Tiong Bahru Social Club is a classic example where it's really a fun, refreshing kind of film, which may or may not have worked commercially, but I mean, it's great that now it's been selling out all these shows. So I'm looking forward to more like lighthearted but also thought-provoking kind of content from Singapore filmmakers. All right, cheers, bye.